Welcome to the last episode on clause. We have already discussed clause and its types and also learned the subordinate clause and its classification. Clause can be classified into principal, subordinate and coordinate. The subordinate clause is again classified into noun clause, adjective clause and adverbial clause. In earlier videos, we discussed noun clause and adjective clause, and the rest is adverbial clause. Today, I am going to discuss adverbial clause. An adverb or adverbial clause acts as an adverb. What is the function of an adverb in a sentence? An adverb usually qualifies a verb, an adjective, or any other adverb. But it must be remembered that an adverb can also qualify a sentence or any part of speech except a noun or a pronoun. An adverbial clause generally denotes time, place, cause or reason, result or effect, purpose, condition, contrast or concession, comparison or degree, and manner. Let us begin with the example, when the sun rose, we started our journey. In the sentence, there are two clauses, when the sun rose and we started our journey. We can see that the second clause, we started our journey, can express its meaning independently, so it's an independent clause or principal clause. Whereas the first clause, when the sun rose, is a subordinate clause because it depends on the principal clause. The subordinate clause starts with the subordinating conjunction when it joins the subordinate clause to the principal clause. The subordinate clause modifies or qualifies the verb started in the principal clause. So, the subordinate clause acts as an adverb qualifying a verb. If we question, when did you start our journey? The answer will be when the sun rose. Hence, the subordinate clause qualifies the verb started. So, the subordinate clause is an adverbial clause. It's an adverbial clause of time. We must keep in mind that an adverbial clause starts with a subordinating conjunction. If a sentence begins with an adverbial clause, a comma is placed after it. An adverbial clause of time can be introduced by when, after, before, since, while, till, until, etc. Next, adverbial clause of place. Example, our network follows you wherever you go. In the sentence, there are two clauses, our network follows you and wherever you go. The first clause, our network follows you, is the principal clause because it can stand independently. Whereas the second clause, wherever you go, is a subordinate clause because it depends on the principal clause. The subordinate clause starts with the subordinating conjunction wherever. The subordinate clause qualifies the verb follows in the principal clause. So, the subordinate clause acts as an adverb and it's an adverbial clause. An adverbial clause of place answers to the question where. If we question, where does our network follow you? The answer will be wherever you go. So it is clear that the adverbial clause of place qualifies the verb follows in the principal clause. An adverbial clause of place can also be introduced by where, whence, wherever, etc. Now, the adverbial clause of cause or reason. Example, I could not attend school because I was ill. The sentence begins with the principal clause, I could not attend school, and the subordinate clause, because I was ill, follows the principal clause. The subordinate clause starts with the subordinating conjunction because. The clause qualifies the verb attend in the principal clause. The subordinate clause not only qualifies the verb attend, but it also qualifies an adverb not. So we can come to the conclusion that the adverbial clause qualifies a verb and an adverb together. So the clause because I was ill is an adverbial clause of cause or reason. If we question why could I not attend school, the answer is because I was ill. The adverbial clause of cause or reason answers to the question why. An adverbial clause of cause or reason is introduced by as, because, since, etc. Let us move on to adverbial clause of result or effect. Example: the old man was so weak that he could not walk. The sentence starts with the principal clause, the old man was weak, and the subordinate clause, so that he could not walk, follows the principal clause. The subordinate clause starts with the subordinating conjunction, so that. The subordinate clause qualifies the adjective weak in the principal clause. If we question what is the effect or result of his weakness, the answer is that, or how much weak was the old man? He was so weak that he could not walk. So it is clear that the subordinate clause qualifies an adjective. So it's an adverbial clause. It's an adverbial clause of result or effect. An adverbial clause of result or effect is also introduced by that, so that, such that, etc. In these examples, the adverbial clause shows the result, whereas the principal clause shows the cause. But in the previous example of adverbial clause of cause or reason, the adverbial clause shows the cause, whereas the principal clause shows the result. Next, adverbial clause of purpose. Example: we eat that we may live. Again, the sentence starts with the principal clause and the subordinate clause, that we may live, follows it. The subordinate clause starts with the subordinating conjunction that. The subordinate clause qualifies the verb eat. Why do we eat? The answer will be that we may live. So, the purpose of our eating is that we may live. We can see that the subordinate clause qualifies the verb eat. So, it's an adverbial clause of purpose. An adverbial clause of purpose can also be introduced by that, so that, in order that, etc. Now, adverbial clause of condition. Example: if it is rains, I shall not come. The sentence starts with the subordinate clause if it rains, and the principal clause I shall not come follows it. The sentence starts with the subordinating conjunction if, and a comma is placed after the subordinate clause. The subordinate clause modifies or qualifies the verb come. It expresses the condition of my coming. On what condition shall I not come? The condition is that if it rains. So, the subordinate clause is an adverbial clause of condition. Adverbial clause of condition is also known as conditional clause. In the given example, the sentence starts with adverbial clause of condition, but the sentence can also be started with the principal clause I shall not come if it rains. The meaning remains the same if the sentence is started with the principal clause. Also, you must keep in mind that future tense is not used in adverbial clause of condition or conditional clauses. Future tense may be used in the principal clause, but not in adverbial clause of condition. Adverbial clause of condition can also be introduced by if, whether, unless, provided that, in case, etc. Let's proceed to adverbial clause of contrast or concession. Example: though he was poor, he donated to the relief fund. The sentence starts with the subordinate clause, though he was poor, and the principal clause, he donated to the relief fund, follows it. The subordinate clause starts with the subordinating conjunction though, and a comma is placed after the subordinate clause. The subordinate clause qualifies the verb donated in the principal clause. The subordinate clause stands in contrast to the verb donated. It is natural that a poor man will not donate to the relief fund, but the subordinate clause shows the contrast that in spite of being a poor, he donated to the relief fund. Hence, it is clear that the subordinate clause is an adverbial clause as it qualifies the verb donated. It's an adverbial clause of contrast or concession. An adverbial clause of contrast or concession is also introduced by though, although, even, etc. Next, adverbial clause of comparison degree. Example: Murmi is as intelligent as her friend is. The sentence starts with the principal clause, Murmi is intelligent, and the subordinate clause follows the principal clause. The subordinate clause qualifies the adjective intelligent. It draws a comparison between Murmi and her friend. If we question how much intelligent is Murmi, the answer is she is as intelligent as her friend is. So the subordinate clause qualifies an adjective intelligent. It's an adverbial clause of comparison or degree. We all know that degree is the comparison of adjectives. In this case, it's an example of positive degree. An adverbial clause of comparison or degree can also be introduced by as, so as, such as, than, etc. Last but not the least, adverbial clause of manner. Example: you should do as I told you. Again, the sentence starts with the principal clause, you should do, and the subordinate clause, as I told you, follows it. The subordinate clause starts with the subordinating conjunction as. The subordinate clause qualifies the verb do in the principal clause. If we question, how should you do? The answer is, as I told you. So, the adverbial clause, the subordinate clause qualifies the verb do. It shows the manner of doing it. Hence, we can conclude that the subordinate clause is an adverbial clause of manner. An adverbial clause of manner can also be introduced by as if, etc. We have discussed all the 9 types of adverbial clause. Before we end, let's have a comparative study of all the 3 types of subordinate clauses such as noun clause, adjective clause, and adverbial clause. A particular clause may be used as a noun clause, adjective clause, and adverbial clause. Let us study the examples. Example 1. Tell me when you are free. In the sentence, the subordinate clause is when you are free and the principal clause is tell me. The subordinate clause when you are free acts as the object of the verb tell. If we question the verb tell with what, the answer will be when you are free. So the subordinate clause is a noun clause. Example 2. Tell me the time when you are free. In the sentence, the subordinate clause when you are free qualifies the noun the time. The time is the antecedent and the subordinate clause is an adjective clause or relative clause as it qualifies the noun before it. Example 3. Call me when you are free. In this example, the subordinate clause when you were free qualifies the verb call. So it's an adverbial clause. It's an adverbial clause of time. It shows the time of calling. Hence, you can see that the nature of clause depends on its function, that is, how it works. A clear concept of clause and its types will help you to learn how to join and split sentences. Also, you can easily classify the sentences into simple, complex, and compound. My videos on clause and its types will help you to overcome your doubts about clause. Keep watching Backbenchers for latest videos on English grammar. Thanks for watching.